Today, we are diving deep into the explosive events in Nepal that saw a youth-led movement literally topple a government. Now, this all started with a social media ban, but what it uncovered was a nation at its absolute breaking point.
19. Just let that sink in for a second. On September 8th, 2025, that was the number of protesters, many of them just students, who were killed in a single day of clashes in Kathmandu. It's a number that changed everything. So, how on earth did a ban on social media apps lead to this level of tragedy? Well, that's the question, isn't it? And the answer, it reveals a story that's so much deeper than just online censorship. It's about years of simmering anger, a generation feeling completely left behind, and a political system that just refused to change.
All right, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the spark that ignited the whole thing. Then, we'll peel back the layers to understand the discontent that was already simmering. We'll look at the political system on repeat, the day of defiance that turned tragic, and finally, we'll ask, where does Nepal go from here?
So, let's start with that spark. The immediate crisis kicked off when the government decided to ban over 24 of the world's biggest social media platforms. We're talking Facebook, Instagram, X, even YouTube.
And right away, you had two totally different stories. The government said, hey, we're just enforcing the law, these big tech companies didn't register locally, and we need to fight fake news and cybercrime. But for young Nepalis, this felt like a direct attack. It wasn't just about posting pictures or speaking their minds. In an economy that leans heavily on tourism, these platforms were their businesses, their livelihoods. So to them, this ban looked like a blatant attempt to silence criticism and pull the rug out from under them financially. But here's the thing, that ban wasn't really the cause of the fire. It was more like the match that was thrown onto a landscape already soaked in gasoline. The anger had been building for a long time.
You know, long before this ban was even a thought, hashtags like #NepoBabies and #NepoKids were all over Nepali social media. Young people were using those exact platforms to share photos of politicians' kids living it up, with fancy imported cars, lavish foreign holidays, and they were asking a really simple question. Where is all this money coming from when the rest of us can barely get by? This wasn't just online gossip, it was a digital protest against what they saw as blatant corruption and privilege.
And this right here, this shows you the stark economic reality that was fueling all that anger. A staggering 82% of the entire country's workforce is in informal employment. That is way higher than the global average. Good, quality jobs are incredibly hard to come by, which forces thousands of young Nepalis to leave the country every single year just to find work. So you can imagine the frustration, right? Seeing the political elite living in luxury while your own future looks pretty bleak.
And all of this frustration, all this economic anxiety, it was aimed squarely at a political class that felt like it was frozen in time, just rotating power among the same old faces for decades.
People called it the revolving door of leadership, and it was exactly what these protesters were marching against. You had the same powerful figures, Oli, Prachanda, Duba, cycling through the top jobs for years, all while being shadowed by these really serious allegations of corruption, everything from shady land deals to misusing funds. It just created this deep sense of cynicism that the entire system was rigged against the average person.
In this quote, man, this really gets to the heart of the problem. It points out the systemic loophole that basically, as the protesters saw it, made the political elite untouchable. It shielded them from any real accountability. For them, this wasn't some flaw in the system, this was the system, working exactly as it was designed to.
So, all of this anger against the ban, against the corruption, against the lack of opportunity, it was a powder keg. And on September 8th, it finally exploded. It was a day that was planned to be peaceful, but it ended as a national tragedy.
I mean, just look at this timeline. You can see how fast things fell apart. The organizers even circulated instructions for a nonviolent protest, telling people to bring water bottles and their college books. And by morning, thousands had gathered, a lot of them still in their school uniforms. But by the afternoon, peaceful march had just evolved into absolute chaos and bloodshed.
From the protester side of the story, it was a total betrayal. They said they were marching peacefully with their hands up in the air to show they weren't a threat, when all of a sudden police just opened fire. Cell phone videos from that day show scenes of pure panic as a peaceful demonstration turned into a killing field.
But the government, well, they told a very different story. Prime Minister Ali later claimed that the protest had been hijacked by infiltrators and anti-social elements who started the violence, leaving the police with no other choice but to respond with force to restore order.
But here's the thing. Regardless of who started it, the result is not in dispute. 19 people were confirmed dead, including a 12-year-old child. Over 400 were injured. And to put that into perspective, this one single day was bloodier than the entire 2006 movement that led to the end of Nepal's monarchy. It was a day of just profound national trauma. That bloodshed on September 8th, it was a point of no return. It galvanized the protesters, it horrified the nation, and it completely changed the movement's goals. The government's very survival was now on the line.
At first, the government tried to concede. The Home Minister resigned. That social media ban was hastily lifted, but it was way too little, way too late. The anger had just morphed into pure rage. Protesters defied curfews, and in a really shocking escalation, the homes of several top leaders, including the Prime Minister himself, were set on fire. Within 24 hours of that crackdown, KP Sharma Oli resigned.
So you see, this was no longer about a social media ban. Not even close. The core demands had become revolutionary. Sure, they got the Prime Minister's resignation, but their goals went so much further. They wanted the removal of the entire political establishment, that revolving door of leaders who'd been in power for decades. And crucially, they demanded a new, truly independent anti-corruption body to make sure this could never happen again.
But it's really important to note a key difference here. While that initial crackdown was absolutely brutal, the political response that followed was surprisingly quick de-escalation. Unlike in neighboring countries where protesters are often branded as terrorists, Nepal's leadership, after that initial disaster, chose to concede rather than double down. Even the Prime Minister, as he was resigning, spoke about finding a peaceful way forward.
And all of this leaves us with the ultimate question. The youth of Nepal have forced out a prime minister and shaken the entire political system to its core. But is this incredible moment going to lead to a genuine, lasting reset for the country? Or will the old guard, that same system that has endured for decades, just find a new way to reassert its power once the streets go quiet? The answer to that question is going to define Nepal's future.